Everyone, today for attending our Net Zero Carbon Summit. I am very excited because I'm here with Henrik Holland, the Senior Vice President and Global Head of Mobility over at Prologis. And we're going to dive into, I think, one of the criticisms of electric vehicle adoption, electric truck adoption in our industry, which is the infrastructure, the charging infrastructure, and how we're going to make sure that that infrastructure is there to support that widespread adoption in particular. And so, of course, Henrik, thank you so much for being here with us today. I think you're probably the best person for us to dive into this topic.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Grace. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about these really, really important topics, very interesting topics. So, to kind of dive straight into, I think, the challenge that you point to and how we at Prologis think about this problem and about the solutions that we can bring to the table. Let me paint a little bit of context as to what Prologis is. We're the largest industrial real estate company in the world, and industrial real estate is a kind of fancy way of saying industrial outdoor storage, trailer lots, warehouses. So many of the vehicles that today are diesel and that are going to be converting to electric or hydrogen in the future, they visit our locations, right? We have over 3,000 facilities in the United States. We have 5,500 globally across 19 countries. So we have taken it upon ourselves to support our customers with thinking through how they can make this transition happen easily at our facilities, right? So our thesis is that EVs are going to charge where it makes sense, and that in many cases, that's actually going to be at the end nodes of routes, which in many cases will be a warehouse or a trailer drop lot. Right? Think about it a little bit of if you have an EV at home and you can charge at home, you're going to do the majority of your charging of the vehicle at home, and you're going to do some of that on the go. So a key focus for us in terms of making this infrastructure challenge easy for our customers is just making sure that they can charge at home, at the warehouses. So we offer our customers a very simple service-based way to charge vehicles at Prologis facilities, as well as at warehouses that we don't own. So we work closely together with our customers to look at their overall electrification need. Of course, it's much easier for us to do these projects at Prologis locations, but we don't stop there. We help them with these infrastructure challenges in other spots as well as at dedicated charging hubs. So at home, you'll charge your passenger vehicle 80% of the times, but occasionally you're going to make that road trip and you'll have to charge somewhere between Los Angeles, where I'm based, and San Francisco at like a charging hub location. So we're working as well with our customers and partners to develop those sites to be able to create a kind of holistic infrastructure solution for our customers.
I love that approach because I think especially you talk to drivers in particular of where maybe their downtime is or where, right, it's all about hours for drivers, right? And where those hours are used, but they're not moving is at these locations. So it seems to me like a perfect way of course, making sense of what the industry challenges are today, but making that collaboration at these facilities to make sure, okay, we're not going to waste your hours. We're going to allow you to, be able to get unloaded or be at these facilities and charge at the same time. And I guess off of that, and especially that holistic approach, how do you envision as, of course, EVs become more used in our industry? How do you see infrastructure maybe evolving more to meet these needs of drivers and their fleets as well?
Yeah, well, I think that's a really important point that you make there. That downtime and asset utilization is really important to reduce cost overall and to make this transition a reality. And that really starts with understanding customers' needs. So when we look at an electrification opportunity, customers often approach us when they either have made a first purchase of EVs or they're thinking about it. So we sit down with our customers and then think through, well, what are you actually going to do with these vehicles? What's going to be the most efficient way to utilize them? And what does that mean from a charging network perspective, right? And that leads then to site design at a warehouse, or us saying, hey, it might be more efficient to charge in some cases at this dedicated charging hub. I think what's going to happen over time as this market evolves, and it's going to happen in different paces, different states in the country. But if you think about the plans in California, all of the short, all heavy duty drayage being zero emissions by 2035, that market is going to grow very quickly. I think what we're going to see happen is a bit of a transition from more dedicated behind the fence project deployments. So most of our projects today, customers really want to have security that they can charge. And that makes absolute sense, right? This transition is complex enough. You have to think about, now I have an EV and not a diesel. I think what's going to happen over time as these, think about them as network nodes get built out, that charging infrastructure is going to become a little bit more open, right? So where today we might build the ability to charge 30 trucks at a customer site dedicated to that customer's fleet, there's still going to be third-party trucks coming on site. And I think over time, that charging infrastructure is going to become a little bit more open. So the way that we look at our network, I mentioned the more than 3,000 sites that we have in the US, we actually think about every one of those locations being a node in our charging network, augmented with the charging hubs that we're building. And I think that's going to become a much more open network, not just for our customers, but for the third parties that visit these locations. And then lastly, of course, I think what we're going to see, how we are already starting to see our network build out, as I mentioned, the outside of, Prologis locations. So we're quite active in building for third-party landlords at sites that our customers are leasing from those landlords as well, to create a much kind of more mesh network and to create more opportunity and optionality for customers to charge.
I want to talk about one of the other critiques that we see when it comes to this adoption, and that's going back to the utilities, right? And the local governments in particular. How are we distributing this power, the challenges that come from it? Can you speak on some of those challenges and maybe the work that you're doing to help scale up those charging networks with utilities and local governments involved?
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely pointing to, I think, one of the main issues that the industry faces right now. You only have to go to an industry conference on vehicle electrification, and the number one topic will be infrastructure and power distribution. So to kind of build on the point, what we were just discussing about the future of the network. So I think there will be, the network's going to grow. There's going to be more optionality and I think a bit more openness. Charging speeds are also going to increase. One of the key things that we hear from our customers is an ability to reduce charging times. And that requires both improvement of vehicle technology as well as charger technology. But it just means that there's not only going to be more nodes, but the power needs of those nodes are going to become higher. So the let's call it opportunity for utilities and power providers to keep up with that demand is going to be quite significant. The way that we think about that, Prologis switches on a few $1 billion worth of development every year for warehouse development, for data center development. It's very similar to building out a charging location, be it at a warehouse or at a charging hub. So we, across our portfolio, leverage the local and regional relationships that we have with utilities, as well as network knowledge. It's really beneficial to be able to look at a site and say, hey, that site is tied to that particular substation over there. We know that is 80% subscribed. So our opportunity near term is going to be, X amount of capacity at that location. So we work closely with utilities to do that analysis and to plan ahead. Because we have such a large portfolio, we tend to be a large utility customer in general. So we have conversations to look at what that portfolio growth could look like so that they can plan ahead. The second thing that we're doing, and that we really do believe in, is that the energy system is going to be more distributed over time. And what I mean with that is that there's going to be an increasing opportunity for on-site generation. And with that, I mean increased solar adoption, storage at locations as well to manage peak demands and to do some time of use shifting, as well as more novel technologies like linear generation, which sounds kind of futuristic. It's a way to compress and combust hydrogen, could also be renewable natural gas at low temperatures so that you're not emitting any NOx, but you're still getting a high degree of efficiency. So we have solutions in our portfolio to get customers up and running within weeks and then within months at a slightly higher self-generation capacity level whilst we wait for the utility to interconnect. Right. So speed to energization is really critical. Oftentimes it's a huge cliche in our industry, but unfortunately it is kind of true, is that infrastructure is an afterthought. So we have these temporary power solutions to at least get customers going with something as we work on bringing the larger utility interconnection.
You know, it's interesting you bring up, right, infrastructure being an afterthought, but I think in the work that Prologis is doing, infrastructure is never an afterthought. And that's what I think makes your work so unique in helping bring these critiques or problems with a widespread infrastructure and adoption. Really almost have a responsibility or a role to play in all of this at the end of the day. So it's great to see how involved you are as even your own self. You've recently began a new role with the Department of Energy and Transportation's Electric Vehicle Working Group. Can you tell us about what that role is going to play in all of this as well in getting that infrastructure where it needs to be today?
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. So recently, the Department of Energy and Transportation have set up a joint EV working group to advise both those departments on ways to accelerate the adoption to zero emissions transportation. And I think what the joint office has done is really quite unique, is that they've brought together a really diverse set of stakeholders to provide said advice and to come up with ideas on how to make this happen. And the reason I think that's important is because this industry is quite complex in its interdependencies, right? Because without vehicles, there's no infrastructure. Without working together with, municipalities and regional planning agencies, you can't get the infrastructure built. So through this joint office, I think, those departments have created a vehicle to bring these various stakeholder groups together to figure out really pragmatic and practical ways to accelerate this transition, and to also advise on some of the funding pathways that should exist to support the early adoption of both EVs as well as the build out of the infrastructure. I do want to touch on what you said there about infrastructure for us not being an afterthought, because I really love that comment. It is what we live every day. And this is I make this comment at conferences sometimes, and it can land maybe a little controversial. So I actually dare to say that infrastructure doesn't have to be the bottleneck, right? So if we have time to work with our customers, with vehicle OEMs, with fleet management companies who are going to be leasing these vehicles, on where these vehicles are going to go, the development of the infrastructure and the sites to charge those vehicles it's an engineering and a planning and permitting development problem. It's not a fundamental science problem. What we really need to see in this space to get to a higher degree of penetration, we need to see vehicle costs come down, battery technology needs to improve. That's a fundamental science problem, right? And fortunately, so much good work is going on that space. I have no doubt we're going to get to cost parity, even in the heavy duty space in the near term. But on the infrastructure side, it is very much an engineering problem. And being an electrical engineer myself, that's something that we can work with. So when I talk to policymakers, I tend to drive the focus to, let's figure out how we can incentivize the adoption of vehicles, not just with sticks, but also with carrots, so that we can get the machine going on the front end. Then we can plan the capacity against that, right? So I sometimes exaggerate the point infrastructure isn't a problem at all just for effect. Of course, it is challenging, and there's a tremendous amount of investment that needs to be made in transmission and distribution infrastructure. But again, when the parties come together, those are solvable problems. That's how optimistic I'm going to be.
And I'm on the same page with you. And I think that's, again, why I think that Prologis is perfect to help with this problem. Because once again, this is your forethought. This is exactly what's on your mind as a company, as a brand. And for our audience out there, I hope that you feel even more empowered to make these investments. If you're watching this now and you have a fleet, know that we are making the right steps, and there's people like yourself, Henrik, who are out there really pushing for this too. So I want to thank you so much today for being here and sharing your expertise, but more so giving us a peek behind the curtain of what is happening and what is coming here in the future.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Grace. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I think we ended up on a really optimistic note. For those who are kind of struggling with how to think about this, there is help out there. There are parties out there that you can talk to figure this stuff out. And we're happy to be a resource in that process. So thank you so much. And here's to an energized future.
Yes. Cheers to that. And thank you everyone for watching. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.